chapter 50. Here we come to the end of the book of Genesis. The chapter, and therefore the book, concludes with stories of the Egyptians embalming Jacob or mummifying him, which is interesting to think about. And then Joseph goes to bury his father with his ancestors before returning to Egypt and then living the rest of his life and dying at the age of 110, which in Egyptian culture was the age assigned to anyone who had lived his life to an old age and was respected and revered as someone who was wise. And then he's also embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. And this is where the book ends. This amazing book that introduces a people to its God, a book that tells of creation and blessing, of flood and of fall, a book that tells of promise and deception, of peace and struggle. But through it all, it tells a story of a God of covenant, a God who does not abandon his people. In the middle of this chapter, Joseph makes a statement which can serve as a bit of a lens through which we can read this entire book. After he's buried his father, Jacob, he returns to his brothers who, realizing that their little brother, the one they had thrown into a well and sold into slavery so many years ago, was now the second most powerful man in the world. And now that his father was gone, they think he might not be so kind to them anymore. So they invent this story telling Joseph that Jacob had instructed them to beg for his forgiveness and that he should give it. Well, Joseph, I don't know if he buys the story or not, but he sees their genuine need for forgiveness and says to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today." He says, "Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good." Now, this statement is certainly the theme of the story of Joseph, and in a way, it's the theme of the entire book. Just like our lives, the book of Genesis is full of twists and turns and ups and downs. And just like our lives through it all, God never abandons his people. And in the midst of it all, there's this admission that God is working for our good. And the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans says it this way: "We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose." So may you know that you are loved by God. You have been created in his image, claimed as his child in baptism, and called according to his purpose by the Holy Spirit and sealed by the work on his cross. So that whatever twists and turns you encounter, whatever floods and falls you endure, know that our God is a God of hope, a God of promise, a God who will not abandon you, and a God who is always working for your good. Amen.